Well, my name's Shane Bariluk, and I've been living in Seymour since 1929. I was 6 years old when we moved here, and I grew up, and I'm still in the same house. I have never moved. This Seymour is my only place that I lived, and it used to be a beautiful town before the flood, but it's still beautiful. It has its nice spots. But yeah, we grew up on Derby Avenue, all communities, all the neighborhood kids. That's the way it was in those days. Everybody played out in the street and had fun and lived in each other's houses, ate each other's meals, mothers and fathers. Things were different. Came home from school and Mom was home and Papa was working, and it was great times. Nobody knew how poor we were. It was in the 30s. We just had family life, so we didn't really realize how tough things were. Our parents got us through all that. And then I went to annex school in first grade. And I remember I was just telling my daughter the other day, we were talking about it, and we were talking about a play that they did, Hansel and Gretel. And of course their auditorium was the old coal bin. And it was just a little dark little room where the coal, where they used to deliver the coal, was the stage. Of course it was all cleaned up then. But it was so dark, and it was a Hansel and Gretel play. I remember that. And then fifth grade came along, and there were too many kids in fifth grade at Annex, so they shifted us Derby Avenue kids to walk up to Maple Street. And some of the kids lived way down by the underpass, and that's what we did. We had to walk to school back and forth, and even Annex school through the River Road. We still call it River Road, up to our waists in snow and boots, and no whistles to blow that there was no school. We just got off and went. And then came along, I don't know what you want me to talk about, but anyway, after that, of course, the war came along, and that was sad. My husband had to leave for the service, and then he'd come home, and then we had the blackouts during those times. Do you remember them? The blackouts, the sirens would go off and the house would get all dark. And of course I liked that because my husband and I could neck a little bit while the lights were off. That was a good thing. And then after that, after he came home, we had our family. I don't know what you want me to talk about, but we opened Seymour Provisions. We had a meat market it's still there. It's not the meat market, it's a power equipment plant now that they fix machinery. And then we bought the cleaners, Ed's Cleaners. For 60 years we've had it, and my daughter just not sold it, but she closed up and retired from that. And that was my life, but it was a very happy life. Had nice family behind me, and it was just wonderful. A lot of good memories, sliding down Falls Hill and skating at Hoadley's Pond. That was the big place to skate. And Mill Pond up there by the cemetery, which we used to swim. It was just a mud hole, but we all swam there. And of course we would walk from Derby Avenue all the way on these hot, humid days, all the way to this French Park, it's not French Park, Legion Pool, and would swim, and then it'd be so hot, and we'd be walking back home, so if we cooled off or not, but we saw all our friends, and that was our life. That was a great life. Good memories. Grew up the same way, huh?
Basically.
Yeah.
My life was. I've had a very fortunate and lucky. I guess you call it real lucky life. Different things I've had to do or have been exposed to. But anyhow, I was born in 1924. My mother told me on the kitchen table in the house, my great-grandfather's house. And I was raised in that house with my two younger brothers. And one next to me is deceased. He died, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, something like that. But anyhow, I went to to walk to school. I went to this little old wooden schoolhouse. It's something you would read about in a history book about the pot-bellied stove and all that. Well, this school was located at that junction of the Day Street, Pearl Street, Smith Street, and North Street. And as I say, the building was a wooden schoolhouse, 2 stories. It was originally a 1 story that they added on to it before my time. But anyhow, the boys and the girls were kept separate. You had the boys on the right-hand side, the girls on the left-hand side. They each had their own playground. You had the old no inside toilets. That was all out at the edge of the river in the old back house. And there was one building partitioned in the middle, one for the girls and one for the boys. And we had the old woodshed. And the boys had a ball because we used to go down east at recess time, and we'd make ponds, out of the branches of the river, and we'd make little blocks of wood with a stick in them, and try to make little boats so they could sail back and around these little pools we'd make. And we walked to school, and I lived over on Meadow Street. So we walked to school in the morning, and in those days, Route 67, as it is now, was built in probably late 1929, 1930, in that area somewhere, and it was a very dangerous crossover, but no stoplight, no red light, no stop signs or anything. We just ran across the road, that's all, and got down to school. And the downstairs of the school was Mrs. Early. The house that she lived in is across the brook, across the bridge. It's still there. It's a white house on the next to the school, or near the school. And her husband was the custodian, and he'd come over and light the pot-bellied stove in the back. And let's see, it was in the right-hand rear corner of the downstairs room, and the same thing upstairs, if I remember correctly. The front of the classroom, when you walked in the front doors, you walked into a hallway that ran across the width of the building, and they had a white line painted on the floor halfway. The left side was for girls' coats. The boys had the other side, and you did not cross. The boys did not cross that white line, and the girls did not cross the white line in those days. And you had the first grade and half a second grade on the first floor, and the other half of second grade and third grade on the second floor. And then from there, you went. In fourth grade, you started over to Maple Street School, so we had to walk over to Maple Street School. And we'd also walk back at noon hour, at lunchtime, and also come back after we had lunch at home and walk back again in the afternoon, which was equivalent of about 4 miles altogether. And then it got so we used to go down Meadow Street, over Robert Street, across Route 67, down. There was a pathway down into the back end of Keywright's property. And so we'd walk down that path and along the river, back there to the pond, down between the buildings, and lots of times we'd stand and watch them process the raw rubber for insulation of the cables, or we'd see them running the stuff on rolls, and the men would slice it with the knives and keep turning it to mix it. And in those days, of course, the by the boiler room, that was all coal-fired, and there the trucks would bring in the coal and dump it in there. And then we'd walk, past the machine shop, across an iron bridge, a footbridge, across the iron bridge, and up the steps and across another iron bridge to Day Street. And then we go up a little bit on Day Street, and then on up the hill on 3rd Avenue, walk along 3rd Avenue to Culver Street to High Street, and then we walk down past the first two houses, and then we take a shortcut up over the bank and through the wooded area, and come out in the property, the other side of the hill, that to the school grounds. Then we walk down that and down to the school. We did that. As I say, we made 4 trips a day. We go up, back, and I remember sliding down the hill. We used to slide, we'd put a piece of cardboard down and we'd slide. Well, I went down the hill one day and I fell. And I was standing up and I fell and I broke my wrist. And I'm left-handed. So I had to learn to write with my right hand. So I could write with my right hand just as good as I could with my left, but I was slower at it. So as soon as my arm healed, then I went back to the left hand again. And I've been left-handed ever since. But let's see, then after that, after grade school, we went down to high school. Oh, the grade school in Maple Street School, I believe they had, let's see, Mary McNerney was the one downstairs, and Elizabeth Bossity was the one upstairs. And I think they had, I can't remember, but it's something about, I think that Mary McNerney was like the principal downstairs, and what was that other one's name? Beecher. Her name, she was, I think, like the principal upstairs. And I remember one time, I can't remember just what happened now, but anyhow, I was one of them they nailed for, I guess it was slamming the doors or something. It was I think, I can't remember now whether they were swinging doors into the toilet facilities for the men, for the boys, and for the girls. But I think it seems to me though, when you swung the doors, they'd bang together sometimes. And I guess we got balled out for that, and we were going to get the ruler, I guess. Well, I don't know, but we avoided the ruler for some reason. Getting hit in the hand with it. And I don't forget too much about that, but then of course we went to high school, and we walked to high school, and there was a bus. Frank Krevlin, he had the bus business, and he would transport the kids from down the lower end of Seymour, down around toward Ansonia, the Ansonia line there, up to Maple Street School. And he also hauled them from the duck farm upper North Main Street in Seymour to school, because they were over the 1 mile limit or something. And I don't know that I guess they did the other ones for center school, for the other side of town. But anyhow, the kids used to, from down there was, many of them were Italian descent. So they, of course, they'd have they used to wear a bag around their neck sometimes. If they were sick, they had a cold or something. What we call acid. Oh, do you remember what they called those bags? They had some kind of
I thought it was garlic.
Cloves or something in them, and they were big on I guess it was arginol they put in their eyes and all that stuff, and I remember that. And anyhow, and when we got to high school, we also brought in some students from Beacon Falls, some from Bethany, and
Up on the hill.
Oxford.
Up on the hill, Great Hill too. All those farmers up on Great Hill used to come in on the bus.
Yeah, well, see, anybody, it was a long distance.
Yeah.
And, but those towns out around the Seymour, they did send some of their students in because they didn't have a high school. Like some of the kids from Oxford went to, I think,
Naugatuck.
Monroe or one of those places, and some went to
Naugatuck.
Woodbury,
Some
some
of them
Naugatuck. Well, they were spread around. And let's see, it was, and then of course the war came along, and if you were a senior and the marks were good enough, they would let you out early so you could go, if you were going to go to war. So I was one of the, I got out to go to war.
But you know, talking about when we were kids in the Depression years, I was talking to Evelyn about that the other day, about the rag man. The girl came to clean my house the other day, and she said, well, I do with the rag. And I said, throw it in the rag bag. She said, in a rag bag? And I said, well, in those days, everybody had a rag bag, a big burlap bag, and they saved all their rags. And the rag man would, do you remember him?
Yep.
Rag, cash paid for rags, cash paid for rags. And all the, boy, we were poor. And all the women came out with their big bags, and he'd have that big weight scale, you know, he'd hold it up like that,
Yeah.
15 cents, maybe big time. I mean, you know, a nickel, you couldn't have an extra nickel in those days, you know?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the guy came for fat drippings. Mama had a big thing on by the stove, like bacon grease or lard. And some man would come every month, I think he came, and he would take all that grease, and he would, the next time he'd come, he would bring a bar of soap for her, like, you know, wash soap from all that grease, I guess, that they made their soap from, you know?
Did you have a man that came to the house, Mr. Cornblutt from Ansonia?
Yeah.
He had
all the goods in the car, yeah.
all the clothes?
Yeah, the clothes, yeah. Yeah, and then who else used to come by?
Singer.
Singer used to come by with his sister Molly, yeah, from Ansonia. But, and then we had a neighbor, Mr. Buckingham, and his wife. They had no kids. And there used to be a man on Sundays would come with a cart with popcorn every Sunday. He would come down the street, and Mr. Buckingham would buy for all the kids out, all these little urchins out there. And he would buy popcorn for all these kids. Oh my God. My husband tells me some fella in Ansonia, when they were kids, he would put them in a truck and take them to the beach with big things of watermelon. That's how it was in those days, you know, so simple and plain and good old days.
Oh, another thing, pardon me. Another thing I forgot to tell you was you mentioned the store on Nickel Street. And I told you it was Vogel's store.
Vogel's, yeah.
Well, Vogel had a meat market, but he also raised German Shepherd dogs.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And what happened was during the war, some of the dogs went to the Coast Guard as war dogs. And
Yeah, I
then
remember
afterwards, then the dogs were brought back, deprogrammed, and then got brought back to him. That was interesting. They would go with the patrol with the sailors. They would patrol the beaches. See, and then because the submarines could come in pretty close to the beach, and this is our beach in Connecticut here. We even had it, and anyhow, these dogs were trained to go after anybody
The enemy, huh?
tried to come on the beach.
Did you know Walt Upprich?
Yeah.
Because he worked for Mr. Vogel too.
Well, yeah.
Like you took care of the dogs. They were prize show dogs, weren't they?
Oh yeah. He
Yeah.
went with the championship dogs, and he he was selling. I remember he sold dogs to Jacobs over in Woodbridge.
Oh,
Well,
Jacobs.
Jacobs owned Hull Brewery in New Haven. That was years ago. It was a beer manufacturer of beer, and I don't know if it was sold out or what, but he sold them a dog. I remember because they had a couple of kids, and they sold them puppies, and then as soon as that dog grows up with those kids, and you better not touch one of those kids because the dog will go after you. And who was the other one? Oh, remember Lombard Express?
Yeah.
All right. Well, they also bought a dog from Vogel, and to protect their children, because in those days there was a lot of kidnappings. See, and back in the 30s, because of course people were out of jobs and they kidnapped somebody and then hit them up for money. And
A funny story that Walt told me was Miss Worcester,
yeah,
who lived where that beautiful, the hairdressing place
Yeah.
is now. She used to shop at Vogel's, and during the war, you were only allowed a pound of butter, a little bit of meat. He said, and Walt used to deliver, because kids would deliver groceries at that time. Miss Worcester would get everything she wanted.
that was after.
Oh, I remember the
that,
butter.
He was after. Of course, I was in the war then.
Yeah.
I was away, but I remember. Oh, I used to get. Vogel would. I remember this. He had a tray, and he had it in the cooler. It's a walk-in cooler where they kept the meat, and he cut this piece of meat. It was about that big, and about that big around, a roast, and he put it in the. He cut it off, fixed it all up, then took it, put it in the cooler, and I kept seeing this thing in the cooler, and I see the mold on it start growing, you know, and it was pretty high, and it looked like fine hair on it, you know. It was just hair about that size, I guess it seems to me, about that. Well, anyhow, I said something to him about it. I said, what is that piece of meat there? It's got. He said, that's for Miss Worcester.
Sweet.
She
Tender.
ordered the meat, and he cut it for her, but it had to be aged. So it's already aged to a certain degree, but it had to be really aged. So he would have to do that, and then when she was ready for it, or when I don't know whether she asked for it or whether he told her it was ready, he would cut off quite a bit of the meat, actual meat, till it came down to red meat again, you know, and the whole thing, and then he'd take it up to her, because that
was a tenderizer.
That
a tenderizer.
it was tender, and it was well aged, you know. There was nothing wrong with it, but it was really good meat.
They say
Another
the
thing,
molting. Well, we had a meat market.
yeah,
My husband was a butcher
another
when
thing
he came.
they used to the Sons of Herman used to have a banquet, a roast beef dinner, I guess it was, down at Concordia.
Concordia.
Do you remember that? And I was working there when I was in school. I work from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock on Wednesday, and from 7 o'clock in the morning to 11 at night on a Saturday, and for $1.50.
Mm-hmm.
That's all the time $1.50, not an hour.
Yeah.
$1.50 for the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
So then, I go up to her house, deliver groceries there sometimes, and she had a driveway off of Gilliard Street, and it was a cinder driveway, and the gardener would use to rake it, so all it was looked very nice. So we got up there, and I didn't have a driver's license in those days, so I couldn't drive the truck. So he'd hired somebody else to drive the truck. So the guy drove the truck, he went in the driveway and turned around, went in, I put the order in the kitchen. They had one of those old big black stoves, but went right, no legs on this one. This one right to the floor. And I think that was the one for the wealthy people had that type of stove, I guess. But anyhow, I no sooner get back to the store, and she had been on the telephone and complained because the truck made marks in the driveway.
Yeah.
Now, you know when you rake something how it looks, and then if you step on it or you feel a footprint, or we didn't spin the wheels or anything, it was just, everything was nice. And we got bawled out for that, the driver and myself, for driving on that driveway. And she had a 1932 Packard Victoria Coupe, I think it was, a big black one. It was a beautiful car. Daddy-O, I think, owns it now, or did own it. And he restored it. But anyhow, she would go down to get the car, or have her man bring the car down to the house, and then she'd drive it down to the bank, park in front of the Seymour Trust, pardon me, go into the bank, and take care of her business, whatever she was going to do, and come back out, get in the car, and come home. And she had 2 dogs that were terriers, and had one on this side and one on this side, and sitting in the back and looking out the windows. I never forget that too. And her brother, he had a big Packard limousine. It was, I think, tan in color, if I remember correctly. And the word is that they didn't get, the two siblings didn't get along with each other. So she had the house, and he lived up on the 3rd floor. And he drove, can't remember now whether he drove, I think sometimes he drove to work. He worked down at Seymour Manufacturing. That's when the office was down on the corner there, where you go past the supermarket now, and the road curves. Look down there, down in that way.
They never married, either one of them.
That's true. And
I don't remember that.
but I guess from different.
The Matthews, right?
Oh yeah, they're because Bernie Matthews, or Catherine Matthews' mother was, their mother was a Worcester. In fact, I used to chum around with the kids, the Bill, and then